Hello everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena. I make college and book related content here on YouTube, and today I'll be sharing with you all my January wrap up. So in the month of January, I read 6 different books, 4 of which were before school started, and the next 2 were after school started, and they were actually for school. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first book that I read in the month of January was A Sitting in St. James by Rita Williams Garcia. This book is set in 1860 Louisiana in St. James, where there is a plantation that a white family lives on, and Madame Sylvie Goubert, who is the mistress of the plantation, has decided that she wants to get her portrait painted to honor her legacy and to give it to posterity potentially. However, mixed in with this, there are many other perspectives and stories as multiple issues come together. Obviously, this is 1860, so it's right before the Civil War. There's a lot of issues surrounding slavery, as well as classism and wealth and where that wealth comes from, as well as some other like tidbits of French Revolution history as well. And so that kind of all wraps up into this epic historical fiction novel. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. This is an incredibly well-written historical fiction novel. It has so much historical context woven into the story, but it doesn't info dump on you. You learn so much about the time period, the area that this book takes place in. You learn about the people, both the plantation owners and the enslaved individuals on this plantation. There's so much humanity in this book, whether that's through love and relationships, as well as just genuine emotions that just leap off the page. This book really offers a brutal, unflinching portrayal of what slavery was like. I also think this book offers a really nuanced perspective because it's not just good versus bad. There's a lot of complications with different generations and who did what and kind of how the plantation came to be as it is in 1860, which is present day for the novel. There's a wealth of themes covered in this book, including racism, classism, sexism, homophobia, colorism. So many different things are covered in this book, but in such a well-crafted way. And of course, the story is also very compelling and it really pulls you right in. It is so well written. My biggest issues with this book, and my reason for not giving it 5 out of 5 stars, is 1, this book is marketed as young adult, and it is really not young adult. So the content in this book is for a much older audience, and at the very least, like a mature 16-year-old. Other issue is actually bigger than this book being classified as YA, is the character of Byron. Without giving any spoiler alerts, he is the grandson of Madam who lives on the plantation, and he is an interesting character. I think he is really like romanticized, and the reader often allegedly, according to Goodreads reviews, feels really bad for him and is rooting for him, and he's kind of a horrible human being, and I was never really on his side ever. I could totally understand and sympathize with what was going on with his identity and issues like that, but he at the end of the day was still the grandson and was very much involved in degrading and abusing the enslaved people. But I definitely recommend this book. It is a great read. The next book that I read in the month of January was Darius the Great Deserves Better by Adib Khorram. This is the sequel to Darius the Great Is Not Okay, which I read, I think, 2 years ago now. Maybe more than that, honestly, I can't remember. I really, really enjoyed Darius the Great Is Not Okay, so when I saw that my library had this sequel, I wanted to pick it up. It basically starts pretty soon after the first book ends. So Darius is now back in America, and he's trying to grapple with his new life as a soccer player in the high school team, as he has his internship at the really prestigious tea shop in his town. He's also balancing his friendships and really struggling to really adapt to his new life as a boyfriend as well. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars because it was a disappointment. I did have a couple issues with the first book, and they were only amplified in the second book. Specifically, Darius's voice was I just find it annoying and a little bit pretentious in the way that it seems like the author's trying too hard to make Darius sound a certain way. so I didn't really like that. I also didn't love all of the like locker room guy talk. It was just like a little much. A little bit was okay, but then it got to the point where it was just starting to take over the whole narrative, and I was kind of over that and didn't love it. Which also is a downside to the book. More positive things about this book is the author really continues to have great relationships that are portrayed, and really wonderful characters that you love and grow attached to, and also just addresses some important aspects of life as a teenager specifically. So I think that that was really well done again in this sequel, but I just didn't really love Darius in this book, and a lot of the things that happened in the book I just wasn't really obsessed with. The third book that I read in the month of January was Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This book follows Yadriel, who belongs to a traditional Latinx family, and part of his family's heritage is that when they come of age, the boys become brujos. However, Yadriel is struggling to have his family actually accept him for who he is and his gender, because he is transgender, and thus he's not allowed to become a brujo according to his family's kind of tradition. And so while he's trying to prove himself and become a brujo, he does so, but by accident summons the wrong ghost, and he summons Julian, the school's bad boy, who has recently died. Adriel decides to keep Julian around because Julian wants to know what happened to him and how exactly he died, and Yadriel is still trying to solve the mystery of the original ghost he tried to summon, and so together they embark on this journey to figure out what exactly happened, and Yadriel is continuing to try to prove himself to his family. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. To be honest, in the beginning it was a solid 3-star read. It was a little boring, a little predictable. I didn't really love, and I still don't really love, Yadriel as a character. He was a little boring to me, and I didn't like Maritzia, his cousin, either as well. She was actually kind of worse because she was a little too self-centered for me and kind of annoying. But as the book started to pick up, I became more and more invested in the story and the characters. This offers such a rich perspective into Latinx culture, or this sect of Latinx culture, which was really fascinating to read about. I think it was also a very interesting discussion about identity and where you belong and how you fit into your family and how you fit your identity into your family, and whether or not you should be trying to force yourself into fit into something. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It moved from 3 to 4 because I loved the ending, and I also really loved Julian as a character. I thought he was so great, so complex, so interesting to read about. I really liked Julian's friends and the dynamic that was formed between all of them. There was just some really great moments there, and I was crying in this book. This book did make me cry. So I definitely recommend this book. It's absolutely not what I expected when I read the little synopsis, and it is definitely more than the synopsis would let you believe. The 4th book that I read in the month of January was We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. This book follows 14 different perspectives of teenagers in the 1940s as the Japanese Americans are sent to incarceration camps across the country, but specifically starting in the West. I'd heard a little bit about this book off and on, but I honestly didn't know much about it other than that it was a really great read, a really powerful read, and after reading it I can definitely concur. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. With the multitude of POVs, you get so many different perspectives and so much richness and complexity in the way that the story is presented. The author writes in her note that obviously one's experience in an incarceration camp, the experiences are not a monolith. There are so many different feelings among the Japanese American community at the time about how they felt about these camps, how they felt about America, how they felt about Japan, how they felt about the way they were being treated. And so this book offered a really great window into that and some different perspectives. I think this book was really well written, considering that there were so many different perspectives, and you really didn't read most of the characters more than once, but it was so easy to get into their head and really understand who this person was and what their thoughts were. I also think this book points out a really great thing. So often these camps are taught as internment camps instead of incarceration camps, but they're really incarceration camps. I think this novel really shows the horrors that were in these camps and the atrocities that this group of people were forced to face and deal with as directed by the US government, and that even though an apology was issued afterwards, it really didn't make up for what was done. All of their possessions were lost, they were humiliated, they were abused, starved, some of them were murdered. And it was really just a lot of horrible things. And even when we learn about it in school, it's just kind of taught as like all of these people were put in camps, and the camps weren't great, but it wasn't really that bad. And that could not be further from the truth. And this book made me sob. Like, it is a hard read, but it is an essential read, and I definitely recommend it. Now we get on to the books that I read for school, starting with L'Étranger by Albert Camus. I read this book for my contemporary French novel class, and I didn't like this book. It's a classic. It basically follows the main character, Meursault, who his mother dies, he goes to her funeral, he doesn't cry, doesn't feel much emotion, her funeral passes, he continues on with his life, just with friends and lovers, etc. And then one day he kills a man, and he is forced to go to jail and then tried for this, and then, spoiler alert, sentenced to death. And so I really did not like this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and that's being generous. I really wanted to give it 2 out of 5 stars, but I honestly feel like I was rushing a little bit through the end of the book and that I didn't really give it a fair chance. Obviously, I read this book in French. I think there are some really interesting philosophical questions brought up within this novel. I think the premise of the novel is interesting, this idea of being an outsider or a foreigner in a specific place. And also the issues that one deals with when they are an outsider, and the consequences of that. I think that is all very interesting. I just didn't really agree with what Camus was like trying to say, and I didn't like it. Like, I didn't like the writing style. Nothing about this book appealed to me, and like, yes, when I read it, I was like, this is racist and sexist and xenophobic. Like, that's the fact of the matter. And I read a lot of critical articles for this class about how it's not actually that racist, and like it's actually like really liberating for women, and like, I'm sorry, but like I disagree. So maybe I'll change my mind one day, but right now I honestly disagree, and I'm only giving it 3 out of 5 stars because I think I might have rushed through it a little bit, and maybe on a second reread it would be more impactful. And the last book, a complete about face from what I just read, was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, or Rowling. I don't really know what it is. My professor says Rowling, but I thought it was Rowling. This is obviously a reread for me. I have read this book so many times in my life. I read it for the first time in probably 1st or 2nd grade, and have reread the series many, many times since. I'm reading this for a Harry Potter class, obviously. And this was such a charming reread. There's so much nostalgia wrapped up in this book for me, and I was just instantly reminded of the times that I have read this book in my childhood. So obviously I can't really fairly rate this. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5 stars just because it is so wrapped up in nostalgia for me, but also I just think that this book is so revolutionary in what it did and how it transformed the younger readers' world and what they could read and couldn't read. So the fact that I literally hate Harry Potter as a character, I have never liked him. He has always gotten on my nerves and annoyed me because he just makes decisions and does things in a way that I would never. The fact that I still loved this book growing up and was so entranced by it really says something about the writing and the story and the other characters, especially the Weasley family. I definitely, obviously, would recommend this series if you haven't read it already, which I don't know why you haven't, but if you haven't, you should. So those are all the books that I read in the month of January. As we head into the next few months of school, it's going to be a lot of required reading for school, so more French contemporary novels, more Harry Potter, and then some other books thrown into the mix, but hopefully I'll get to do some more pleasure or independent reading. If you like this video, give a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you all next week.